Hey, chances are if you're watching this, you probably have had a kid. You're anticipating it. This would be a good breakout for just about any kids ministry leader. And it's called Discipline with Grace. And so my name is Jeffrey Reed. I work with Lifeway Kids. I live in Nashville. I get to travel across the country, work with a lot of churches that are small, that have they're thin on leadership or volunteers and have a couple of leaders. And I also work with some large churches that have more volunteers than many churches have people. And so in every situation, how you handle a behavior issue is very similar, regardless of church size. Now, I will say, I'm not going to delve into, because I only have 15 minutes. I don't even think I could do this if I had an hour or two. There are always exceptions to these rules. There is always that child that there may be a actual literal physical disability, or there might be a behavior disorder. My wife has her master's in special ed, and she had kids that just out of the blue would react violently and physically, and so they were diagnosed issues. She had autistic kids, and there's a plethora of ranges. There's some mildly autistic and kids that have Asperger's, and there's other things that they may be acting a certain way. And so in those cases, make sure the leaders are informed, because how you handle there has to be specific to that child and in conjunction with their parents or their guardian's direction. So this applies to kids ministry, and in most cases you'll find that this system works. And so it's called 5 steps of grace, discipline with grace. And so these are the orders. It's this will help you remember it: sit, tap, whisper, talk, take. Sit, tap, whisper, talk, take. And so here is what I recommend, and I've done breakouts on this too, and throughout ministry in the last 15 or 20 years and work with the kids, I've never had to go to step 5. Never. Come close maybe once or twice, never had to do it. And so here's how it goes. You have a child that has an issue, and I will say, in order for this to work, you have to have at least 2 leaders in a small group. Now, I'm not talking about a kid that's disruptive in a large group time in a worship environment where you have 20 kids or 30 or 150. I've led a camp where we had 700 or 800 kids. The leaders should be doing their job as they sit with kids, and if you're a communicator on the platform, you can address all of that. But if you're in a small group, when somebody's teaching a Bible story or you're doing an activity, you've got to have another adult leader there, or at least another mature leader that can help, because they're the ones that have to do this. If you're the teacher of a Bible story on a Sunday morning or Wednesday night, whenever you have church, you should be able to focus on teaching the story, and the other leader is going to be tasked with these 5 things. And so what we do is we kind of play good cop, bad cop. On Sunday morning in my church and churches I've served in and led, we have one leader that's the teacher, and the other leader's prime responsibility is to make sure the kids listen. Sometimes they're pretty busy. They're going back and forth, but usually there's 1 or 2 kids, and we intentionally do this. We have the leaders sit at opposite sides of the circle. Now, if you're in a classroom scenario, we have a teacher up front and kids at tables in classrooms where it's kind of a teacher-student thing. A little different. You'll have to have leaders peppered in there. I love the circle because everybody can see almost everybody. We're in a circle. We're sort of all on the same level, although I'm the teacher, the facilitator, but the other teacher's at the opposite side. So in a sense, all the kids are watching me, and that leader's watching kids. And so this leader will go through 5 steps. Anytime we have an issue with a child, we go through 5 steps. The first one is this: sit. So if the leader's not in the circle yet, or is not sitting next to that child, when a child is disruptive or talks to another child or is fidgety or keeps responding inappropriately, sometimes I'm talking and ask a question, and the leader, one kid will just say something just to be funny, and we're trying to listen to the Lord, not that kid. And so that leader, all they have to do is just sit next to him. And very often when a child knows that another authority figure is sitting next to them and in a sense is kind of keeping an eye on them, very often they'll pipe down. At least for a little while they will. Then if it gets to if they do it again, so we haven't said anything to them, nothing's been done, we just kind of let them know that we know they're there, that we're kind of watching them. If they continue, and usually it's just talking, or it's kind of fidgety, a lot of fidgety kids, That's why they have this fidget spinners now. That leader's second is okay, they did the sit, now it's the tap. And the tap is, And the direction is very, very specific. I've said this, everybody knows this is universal. Somebody invented this at some point. That means don't let sound come out of this hole. So this is be quiet. That kid, and we pointed to the teacher. So that nonverbal instruction, you're supposed to be listening to that person. Now, sometimes you can add another step in there and say, if they do it again, we're still in the tap phase. Listen, God is trying to speak. Now, that might confuse the kid. That's not God, that's Pastor Jeffrey, and I certainly don't think I'm God. But the bottom line is, when a teacher is teaching a Bible story, the Holy Spirit is speaking as Scripture is being read. And so God is speaking. And so we want that child to hear that they're not interrupting a small group of their friend or even the teacher. They're interrupting what God has to say here. And that takes it to a whole nother level. So that's something you might want to interject there. So there's the tap and the whisper. And very often when that happens, if we have to do it again, we'll say, listen, you need to be quiet, or I'm going to have to talk to you outside. And so this is like, okay, we not only are sitting next to you, this is the second time you've been warned. The third one is the whisper, and that's if you can't sit still, I'm gonna have to talk to you outside, and if I have to do that, I'm probably gonna have to tell your parents. And when you bring the parents into it, kids tend to kind of pipe down. Not always. Again, you may have to get to the level 4 or even level 5. And so that is let that child know that we are aware of what they're doing, and again, always with love and grace. I'm so glad you're here, but you've got to listen because other people are here to hear God speak, even though they don't want to. It's not about them misbehaving; it's about them interrupting other people's ability to hear the Lord. So that third one is that whisper, and that's a big one because you've given them the warning that you're going to take them out to talk to them. If it gets to a point where the child, you never want to grab arms. I had a leader a couple weeks ago. He was new. I hadn't trained him. And he grabbed a kid's arm like I could see tight, and the kid was like almost teared up, and I couldn't intervene quick enough. But man, loving touch, loving way on shoulders, gentle on the back head, and you got to be careful too. Some kids don't like any kind of touch, and that's cool. Just loving, say, hey, listen, I need to be quiet. We're gonna have to go. I need you to come with me. And they won't go, why? If they do, you say, why? You say, I told you why, and now we need to go. And hopefully it doesn't disrupt the circle. The fourth step is the talk. So we've had sit, tap, whisper, talk. You're going to take them out to the hall, and if you have a 2-leader, you need to have 2 leaders in the room, so it might just have to be the edge of the room. If you have 2 adults in that room, take them in the hall where they can still be seen. You should never be with a kid, even in the hallway where it's just you and them. So make sure there's always eye contact with other leaders. As you're talking to that child, and you, in the most loving way, say, listen, I sat next to you because you were talking, and then I tapped you and told you to listen, and you're going through these steps just like I'm going through them with you. And then I told you if you did it again, I was going to have to talk to you. So this is the 4th time. That number, you got a number, and you've got ammo if it comes to number 5. I've gotten to number 4 quite a bit with kids, and our leaders have over the years. We rarely get to 5. I think once or twice in all my years. And so that 4 is like, listen, everybody's here because God has called us to gather together and to listen to his word. And so he speaks through whoever the teacher is. He speaks through his Bible, and everybody is here to hear that. It's okay if you don't want to listen, but you should never keep somebody else from listening and paying attention. And that's kind of what you're doing. You're disrupting them. So you've not put on the kid like, you're a bad kid, you can't listen, you can't sit still. It's like, no, other kids are here to listen. Also hopefully compels them to want to be one of those kids that wants to listen. And I know I've got some kids that cannot sit still at all. They're good kids, good hearts. They just can't sit still. So when you bring it in, sort of bring a spiritual context to it, sometimes you got to show self-control and sit still even though it's really hard. And I always tell them too, this helps. I'm an adult that can't sit still. I was a kid that couldn't sit still. I know what you're going through. I know how hard it is, but it's only for a short period of time. And we keep things moving. So it's never more than 10 minutes that they have to sit there. And so that 4th time, and then you're real specific. You say, listen, 4 times we've kind of had to get onto. The 5th time, we'll get up and go get your parents out of church. Man, that's a big one. Getting a parent out of church, the number comes on the screen or whatever system you guys have. That's a big one for the kid. And you're like, listen, and by the way, if you do any of these things and you say you're going to do something, let your yes be yes and your no be no. I believe firmly that when kids hear us say we're going to do something and we give them a warning and we don't do it, we've lost credibility for eons. It takes a long time to earn that. You lose credibility when you make a threat. So be careful if you make a threat like that. Say, if you do it again, I'm going to have to get your mom. And they do it again, you got to get their mom or their dad, whoever they fear the most. And so that fifth time, again, I've hardly ever, I think one time I've had to get to that. And that when I did go get that mom out, I actually went to her in the service. I said, can I see you for just 1 second? I said, and the first thing, because parents will freak out if you're not careful, you don't want to make it, you just want to be real, you want to get them out so nobody else sees the conversation and say, listen, we love, and you name the kid, we love them so much, so glad they're here. But we also have, a bunch of other kids that are here, and they're trying to listen, and he's kind of being disruptive. He's not, you just want to be real honest. He's not being bad or mean. He's just disrupting them from hearing the Lord. Again, you're putting it in spiritual context. And to say, we gave them 5 warnings, because you went through with the kid, we gave them 5 warnings. And the parent hears that and be like, oh, say, no, it's okay. The first is like a gentle, just sit next to him, and then we kind of tap them. And we go through them with the parents, so they know exactly what we've gone through. And then we said, and we told them that if they did it again, we'd have to come get you. And so that's why we're here. We want them back next week. So we just want to let you know, do you want to come talk to them now or just wait till church is out? I think we scared them enough when we left the room. And then you let the parent kind of handle it there. So beyond that, and this is what we said to the parent that time, that 5th time, say, we would love for them to come back, but you're going to need to sit with them. And I know that freaks pastors out and like, they're not going to come back. We want their kid there. We want their parent there. But when we take another leader that's constantly having to take care of a child where there's a discipline issue, we're taking a leader out of the normal functions anyway. So we might as well take a parent out of the church service to sit with their kid to kind of show how important our leaders are and what they do. Like to have a leader that's sitting with a kid. Now, this is not a special needs thing either, because I believe special needs programs are great when they have a one-on-one and they have one of our assigned leaders assigned to a special needs child. This is not that scenario. This is where we have a child that should be able to function in this group setting, and so we're having the parents sit with them. And that time I had that fifth time, that child was never a problem again. In fact, I made an effort before time. I said, dude, we're gonna have a great Sunday today, right, buddy? And it was a boy. It's boys more often than not. But it gave us a chance to demonstrate that we were willing to show, and I do believe in forgiveness 70 times 7. We forgive incessantly, as we should, as children of God. We should forgive each other. But this is a different scenario. We give them 5 opportunities, sometimes 6, because it's not just like, hey, you didn't do anything against me. You're disrupting the gathering of believers. Hebrews 10:25, do not forsake the gathering of the saints. These little kids are hearing from God, so it's a matter of disrupting that. It's something that we wrestle with in kids ministry because we want to be a loving environment. We also want to demonstrate the authority of God, and so there's a balance there. And sometimes we're too authoritative, and sometimes we're too slack. And in both scenarios, kids are hurt. When we're too authoritative, the kid feels like, because we represent God in the church, that God's judgmental and that God is harsh. And likewise, when we're too lenient, nothing is accomplished, and there's very little spiritual growth because everybody's disruptive, and kids think that church is a place where we can be wild instead of, which I want to have fun. I'm wild, but it's basically most of our time is spent handling issues instead of listening to what God has to say and singing and worshiping and things like that. So we got to figure out that balance in there. And this 5 steps, hopefully this helps you out if you haven't come up with a system of discipline for your kids. Hopefully this is something that'll work for you. We find that it kind of works around kindergarten on up to even in middle school. You'll also know right away that you have kids that get no discipline at home. And so you might have to get to that 5th step pretty quickly. You have other kids that once they realize they're on your radar and you know their name, that's big too. Learn their name, because when you call their name out, it's not like, oh, he's not going to tell on this kid, this vague child, he knows my name. That means he probably knows my mom. And so, again, is it always a boy? It seems like it. Well, boys or girls, it doesn't matter. I just hope that you have a great orderly time on Sunday mornings. You have fun and have a blast, but that you're able to keep your kids so that they're listening to God's word as well as having fun in your ministry. Thank you guys so much for your time.